Dr. Nightechoes. I was out to dinner with my family in a small skiing village where we had recently bought a cottage. It was our first time eating out since arriving, and the restaurant had been recommended by locals. Nothing about the place stood out at first. It was warm, busy, and loud, with people coming in from the cold. The moment we walked through the door, my little sister stopped moving. She looked around slowly, like she was trying to remember something. Then she said, very casually, "I know this place. My mother and I used to paint here." My mom laughed at first and told her we had never been there before. She thought my sister was just playing around. My sister shook her head and corrected her. She said, "No, my mother from before. We used to paint here all the time." She didn't sound excited or confused. She sounded certain. We all exchanged looks, but no one pushed it. She was young, and kids say strange things. We were seated, menus handed out, and the moment passed. Still, she kept looking around the room, studying the walls and the ceiling like she expected something to be different. Later, while the waitress was taking our order, my sister pointed toward the far side of the room. She said that's where the big tables used to be. She said the light was better there for painting. The waitress paused and asked her what she meant. My sister repeated herself. She said it used to be a place where people painted. She said her mother stood near the windows and she would sit on the floor with brushes that were too big for her hands. The waitress went quiet. Then she told us that the building had been an art studio for decades. It operated through most of the 1900s and only closed in the early 2000s when it was renovated into a restaurant. No one at the table spoke. The waitress stood there with her notepad lowered, staring at my sister. My sister didn't react at all. She just nodded, like that explained everything. We finished dinner in silence. On the way out, my sister looked back once and said she missed how it smelled before. She couldn't explain what she meant. Years later, she doesn't remember saying any of it, but every time I pass that restaurant, I still wonder who she was talking about when she said, "My mother from before." I don't remember any of this myself. I only know because my parents eventually told me years later, when I was old enough to ask questions that made them uncomfortable. When I was 4, I used to wake the entire house almost every night. It always started the same way. I would scream a name, Sarah, over and over, loud enough that my parents would run from their room thinking something was wrong. By the time they reached me, I would be sitting upright in bed, crying so hard I could barely breathe. They said I kept calling for help. Not their help, just help. Then I would start apologizing. I would repeat the same words again and again. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I wouldn't respond properly when they spoke to me. I wasn't really awake, just crying and shaking until my body wore itself out. In the morning, I never remembered anything. No dreams, no fear, nothing. My parents tried everything. Night lights, sitting with me until I fell asleep, talking to doctors. Nothing worked. The episodes kept happening for months. What confused them the most was the name, Sarah. We didn't know anyone named Sarah. I didn't go to preschool yet. We didn't have TV, no books with that name, no friends, no relatives. There was no reason for a 4-year-old to fixate on it, let alone scream it in terror every night. After almost a year, it stopped. Just like that. One night passed quietly, then another. My parents waited for it to come back, but it didn't. Eventually, my mom asked me about it during the day. She asked who Sarah was. She said I looked at her calmly and told her something strange. I said Sarah didn't want me to cry anymore. I said she didn't like it when I was upset, so I promised I would stop. That was all. I grew up without remembering any of this. Years later, as an adult, I mentioned to my parents that I always liked the name Sarah. I said it felt important to me for some reason. That's when they told me everything. I still don't remember the dreams, but sometimes, when I hear that name spoken softly, I feel a tightness in my chest. Not fear, guilt. Like I failed someone a long time ago, and I don't know who I was apologizing to, or why she finally forgave me. I was very young when it happened, too young to remember it myself. I only know about it because my mother still can't talk about it without her voice changing. I was a toddler, barely speaking in full sentences yet. One afternoon, my mother was sitting with me in the living room. I was playing on the floor with my toys, quiet for once. She said I suddenly looked up at her and studied her face in a way that made her uncomfortable. Not curious, not playful, just focused. Then I said, very clearly, I used to be your dad. She laughed at first. She thought it was something I picked up from a cartoon or a family joke. She asked me what I meant. I didn't laugh. I didn't smile. I stood up, walked over to her, and repeated it, slower this time, like she hadn't heard me properly the first time. I used to be your dad. She told me that wasn't possible. She said her dad had died. She said I was confused. I got upset, not crying, just frustrated. I remember that part. I remember feeling like she wasn't listening. I told her she used to sit next to my bed when I was sick. I told her she cried when I couldn't breathe right at the end. I told her she held my hand even when it scared her. She went very quiet. Her father had died suddenly, lung failure, 9 months before I was born. She asked me how I could know those things. I shrugged. I didn't understand why it mattered. To me, it felt obvious, like reminding someone of something they had forgotten. After that, she started paying close attention to me. She noticed things I said without realizing. How I avoided certain foods he hated. How I reacted strongly to songs he used to listen to. How I would get confused when she called me by my name, like it didn't fully belong to me yet. The strangest part is that it didn't last. As I got older, the memories faded. The certainty faded with them. By the time I was 4, I didn't remember saying any of it. When my mother asked, I laughed and told her she was making it up. Now I'm grown. I don't remember being anyone else. But sometimes, when she looks at me for too long, I know she's not just seeing her child. She's wondering who I was before she knew me. I never had biological children. I'm 60 now, and that's just how my life turned out. I married into a family instead. My partner and I have been together for nearly 30 years. Her kids grew up, they had kids of their own. I became a grandfather without ever being a father, and I was content with that. There was something from my past I rarely thought about. It felt buried, old, not useful to revisit. When I was 13 or 14, my girlfriend got pregnant. It was quick and quiet and handled without discussion. There was an abortion. That was the end of it, or so I believed. She once told me they were twins. I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions either. I was a kid myself. Life moved on. Decades passed. One afternoon, my granddaughter, who was about 4 at the time, asked her mother a question out of nowhere. She wasn't upset. She wasn't playing. She asked it calmly, like she was asking about something she already understood. She said, "What happened to Papa's babies?" "There were 2 of them, but they're dead now." My daughter froze. She asked her where she heard that. My granddaughter shrugged. She said she just knew. She said it the same way kids say they know the sky is blue. When my partner told me, I laughed at first. Nervous laughter. Kids say strange things. They pick up ideas. They imagine stories. That's what I told myself. But later that night, I couldn't sleep. I realized no one in the family knew about the pregnancy. No one. Not my partner, not her children, not anyone who could have said something careless around a child. I had never spoken about it out loud. I barely let myself think about it. And my granddaughter didn't say 1 baby. She said 2. I started noticing small things after that. The way she sometimes stared at me, like she was waiting for me to remember something. The way she once asked why I looked sad when I watched her sleep. The way she held my hand tighter than necessary, like she was afraid I might disappear. I never asked her questions. I was afraid of the answers. I think about it more now that I'm older, about the timing, about the number, about how sure she sounded, about how some things don't seem to stay gone, even when you believe they're erased. I don't know what she remembers. I don't know who she thinks I am. I just know that sometimes, when she looks at me, it feels like she's counting. My grandmother used to tell this story quietly, like she was afraid it might hear her. My dad was around 2 or 3 years old when he said it. He wasn't upset. He wasn't crying. He said it casually, the way toddlers state facts without knowing they're supposed to matter. He told her that he had almost been born before. He said he was very sick that time. He said his body didn't work right, so he died. Then he said he had to wait and come back later. My grandmother laughed it off at first. She told him he was imagining things. She tried to redirect him to toys or cartoons. But he repeated it more than once, always the same way. He never changed the wording. He never added drama. He just stated it, like a memory. She asked him what he meant by before. He told her it was before he was her baby. He said he was in her belly, but it didn't last long. He said it hurt, and then it stopped. He said coming back took a long time. That was when my grandmother stopped smiling. Years before my dad was born, she had been pregnant. It was early, but not early enough to ignore. The pregnancy ended suddenly. Doctors later told her it was likely caused by birth defects linked to a medication she had been prescribed at the time. She never spoke about it after that. Not to friends, not to family, not even to my grandfather. She had never mentioned it to my dad. No one had. There were no photos, no keepsakes, no stories. It wasn't discussed in the house. There was nothing for a toddler to overhear or repeat. After that conversation, my dad never brought it up again, not once. As he grew older, he had no memory of saying it. When my grandmother eventually told him the story as an adult, he laughed awkwardly and said, "Kids say strange things." But she never forgot the look on his face when he said it. Calm, certain, like he wasn't explaining a thought, but recalling an event. She said what stayed with her wasn't the words, it was the timing. The way his age lined up with how long she had grieved without realizing it. The way he said he had waited. She used to say that maybe some people don't get it right the first time. Maybe some lives knock once, leave quietly, and come back when the door is safer to open. My daughter started talking about her grandson before she could even say full sentences properly. She would mention him casually while playing. I assumed it was an imaginary friend. Kids invent things. I didn't think much of it at first. She said he lived somewhere else, not here. She called it her old house, her old neighborhood. That alone didn't make sense. She has never lived anywhere but this apartment. She has never even stayed overnight anywhere else. Still, she talked about him like he was real, like he belonged to her. A few nights ago, that changed. She came out of her room at bedtime crying so hard she could barely breathe. Not whining, not fussing, full sobbing. I picked her up and asked what was wrong. She buried her face in my shoulder and said she was sad because she missed her grandson. She said he lived in her old house and she wanted to go back. I asked her what she meant by old house. She wiped her nose and said it was before. That was all she would say. After that night, I started asking questions. Sometimes she answered. Sometimes she laughed like it was a game. One evening, she told me he sleeps in a crib. She said it like that detail mattered. She also said his tongue was white. I didn't even know what to do with that. When I asked his name later, she said, Guga, and laughed until she fell over. I tried telling myself it was just imagination, but then she said something else. A few months ago, I lost a baby. Early, but not early enough to ignore. I never talked about it around her. I never cried in front of her. I tried to keep it contained. One afternoon, out of nowhere, she touched my stomach and said the baby was tired and went away. She said it the same calm way she talks about her grandson. I asked her how she knew that. She shrugged and said she remembered. Since then, I watch her more closely at night. Sometimes she stares down the hallway like she's listening. Sometimes she talks softly to no one I can see. When I ask who she's talking to, she says she's telling him good night. She doesn't seem scared. That's what scares me. She talks like someone who already lived a whole life, like someone who lost things before, like someone who knows what it feels like to miss someone you're not supposed to remember at all. I remember telling my mother about my royal family when I was around 3 years old. She laughed it off at the time, the way parents do when a toddler says something strange but harmless. I didn't know how to explain it properly then. I barely know how to explain it now. I just knew it felt real. The memory has never faded. I'm standing in a desert as the sun is going down. The light is orange and heavy, like the air itself is tired. In front of us is a shallow pool of dark water. It isn't large, but everyone treats it like it matters more than anything else around us. No one touches it. No one steps too close. There's a quiet tension in the air, like the wrong move could ruin something important. I know the people with me. I know them without knowing how. One of them is my younger brother. He's curious, restless. He doesn't understand why everyone is so serious. He kneels down and splashes the water with his hand. Just once. Everything changes. People rush forward, voices rise, anger and fear mix together. Someone grabs him and pulls him back. I don't remember the words that were said, only the feeling that something sacred had been violated, something that couldn't be undone. Even now, when I think about it, my chest tightens the same way it did in that moment. That memory stayed with me as I grew up. I never talked about it much. I didn't want to sound crazy. It felt private, like something I wasn't supposed to share. When I was 16, I met someone who would later become a close friend. We stayed friends for years. When we were 18, we ended up talking about reincarnation late one night. I mentioned, carefully, that I sometimes felt like I remembered another life. He went quiet. Then he told me a story. He described standing in a desert at sunset, a dark, shallow pool. People gathered around it. He said he was the younger brother. He said he touched the water. He said everyone got angry. I had never told him my memory. Not once. We sat there in silence after that. Neither of us laughed. Neither of us tried to explain it away. I still don't know what that place was, or who we were supposed to be. I just know that somewhere, in some way, we both remember the same mistake. And whatever was lost at that pool, it feels like it's still waiting for us to understand it.